Its evolution has been brisk. Its transformation from experimental to indispensable. This two-part documentary will recall its landmark moments, hear from its iconic figures, and chart the history of the Cricket World Cup. The landscape was so different back then. The game of cricket, steeped in tradition, had a bright future. And that future, it seemed, was 5-day test matches. England in 1975 would challenge the established thinking. During an untypically warm British summer, the dynamics of the game would be altered irreversibly.
That's when one-day cricket really took off, because everyone remembers the 1975 World Cup final.
Yet here was a formula sceptics viewed as a threat to the game as they knew it, an event which would compromise the philosophy, the very ethos of cricket. The 60-over competition was described by one journalist as the most ambitious innovation since the legalisation of overarm bowling. But it turned out to be a bigger success story than anybody could have imagined.
England was the ideal place to hold it, of course, with the diaspora of the West Indies and India and Pakistan and Sri Lanka. Everyone was there. They had support, and all the grounds would be full.
And so, bathed in bright sunshine, the first ever World Cup began. England's Dennis Amiss, the first man to reach 3 figures.
We knew that one-day cricket was the way forward, and it was just fine-tuning it and getting it right. I think the World Cup has been good for the game.
India's Madan Lal played in that first ever World Cup fixture and remembers a sense of excitement and nerves.
And that's it, swinging away.
It's a whole new experience, you know. At home we didn't play that much one-day cricket, and the people were not expecting us to win anything. So we were just new to one-day cricket. We were just analysing the whole things, how to play this one-day game.
England were quick to embrace a more adventurous approach, but the Indians had different ideas.
We got a 300 on, I think, didn't we? And Gavaskar came out and blocked.
Gavaskar batted 60 overs and was not out at the end for 36. I don't think he quite understood what the concept of limited overs cricket was all about.
One Indian supporter delivered his own personal message of protest, but Sunil Gavaskar himself was making a stand.
He was just protesting that, we got too many runs, and there we were, all the fielders, because there's no restrictions on how many you could have out on the boundary, so we had a pretty defensive field.
Techniques and strategies would quickly evolve. The Australians decided to stick with what they knew, employing test match tactics throughout.
It was new, we didn't know what to do, and like I know that Ian Chappell used to say to us, if we get through the first 15 overs and we've got 30 runs on the board, without a loss of a wicket, we've done well. And God, these days, if you haven't got 100 runs on the board after 15 overs, there's something wrong with the batting.
Alvin Kallicharran would launch a fierce assault on Dennis Lillee at the Oval to announce the West Indies as a team to be respected.
Magnificent hit, picked up from round about leg stump.
Many of their squad were playing English county cricket, so had an understanding of the conditions.
Beautifully timed, and that's really hit the fence hard.
They were led by a player who'd come to be captain in the most unexpected of circumstances.
I'd made 100 against Yorkshire in the Roses game, Leeds, and I was having a drink with the guys, so they're just celebrating. And a fellow called Howard Booth said, "Congratulations, Clive." I said, "Oh, it was a good pitch," and so on. And I thought he was talking about the game. He said, "No, I'm not talking about the century you made." I said, "You'll just be made captain of the West Indies." So the journalist knew before I did.
Clive Lloyd was able to bring together the disparate bands of the West Indies like no captain before or since. His personality encouraging performances from the likes of a young Viv Richards, amongst others.
I was a young fella, I hadn't captained anybody. So here I was captaining Lance Gibbs and Ron Cannon, fellas that I looked up to as a youngster. And then we had this band of young players who were now coming into, Viv Richards was not a big name yet. Gordon Greenidge wasn't a big name. Roy Fredericks was still coming through. So the point is that we had guys who had somebody there who they trusted. And we were getting into this winning habit.
Given the support and appetite for the game, England would turn out to be the perfect host country for the first World Cup. Come the semi-finals, the locals were silenced by a familiar adversary, but less familiar face.
Now it's Gary Gilmore, his second over of the day to Amos. Well bowled, and that's out! What a good delivery!
To be given the conditions to bowl in that morning was freakish, really, and I ran in and the ball was swinging a mile, and the English batsmen who had been brought up on those conditions just had no idea in the long run, and I was the ball was swinging back in and they were just letting the thing go and just whacking them on the pads, and Bill Alley and these guys were doing the right thing and putting their finger up.
And that's a brilliant catch, a beautiful catch by Marsh, taking it almost out of Ian Chappell's hands.
We just went around all over the place. You just thought, batting, my God, this is hard work. And, how are we going to get a total here? It was just one of those heavy, hazy days, and it just went all over the place.
I was a young upstart who probably thought I was pretty good, and things went my way, and they just kept going that day.
And he's out! Another one gone, Alan Knott.
Gary Gilmore would be the unlikely hero, with England bowled out for 93.
Blokes like Dennis Amos and Barry Wood, Greggy, a bloke called Frank Hayes, Mike Dennis, all should have been experienced in what was going to happen on that morning, and they failed the test.
The tournament brought together the 6 established test-playing nations, along with Sri Lanka and East Africa. All the teams stayed in the same hotel, and there were just 15 matches. In the second semi-final, the West Indies were at their ruthless best, destroying New Zealand with a performance of skill and a newfound discipline.
Oh, and that's magnificently caught by Rohan Kaman. What a magnificent catch.
Our players were not as professional as they should have been by playing county cricket. That helped us quite a lot, because you were batting probably 6 times a week. In the old days, those guys, 6 times, you'd play the whole season of cricket in the West Indies. So their professional attitude was a little bit different. We were brought up in a different era. We had to sort of get our players to inculcate the right sort of habits.
What a great streak.
We had come from 2 years ago, we were bottom of the ladder, more or less. And here we are in the final of the first World Cup ever. And we were about to beat the best team in the world.
As it turned out, the watching public were about to witness one of the finest matches ever to grace the famous Lord's turf. Much has been written about the 1975 World Cup final, but one man had the best seat in the house.
It was a great honour for me. It's the best match I've ever stood in. No doubt about that. All the test matches, all the one-day internationals, that 1975 World Cup final was the best cricket match that I stood in, because it had everything.
The favourites West Indies were backed by a noisy and colourful support, making Lords feel more like Bridgetown, Barbados. The Australians, ambivalent before the start of the competition, warming to the task with 3 early wickets.
great hook shot. It's out of the ground. Oh, well, what bad luck that was. Played a magnificent shot, trod on his wicket, hit a 6.
Well, the point is that we were struggling. We lost 2 wickets, 3, and I got dropped at mid-wicket by Ross Edwards.
And he's dropped him. A let off there for Clive Lloyd.
But after then, the ball just sort of hitting the bat rather sweetly. I said, well, this must be my day, and it continued. And I had Rohan Kanai at the other end, a senior person, someone who, you know, I had a lot of respect for. And we just took it from there.
What a great shot. What a great shot. Stood still almost and hammered it away through mid-off for 4.
Typical Clive Lloyd came out and just manhandled the Australian attack when the West Indies were in a little bit of strife. But for that innings was memorable.
Straight down the ground. 51 to Clive Lloyd.
People say that my face is the same way all the time, if we're doing well or not. So they really don't know if we're in trouble. Or I tend not to let things trouble me, really, or let the opposition see that I'm in trouble. So I probably would have been a very good poker player.
The atmosphere, Lords, packed to capacity, 99% West Indian, 100% English and Australian. It was a great day, and in the end, the way it finished with us being beaten by 17 runs, the better team won.
Lloyd's 100 enabled the West Indies to post a commanding 291. The Australia reply briefly flickered, but Viv Richards was all youth and agility. 3 timely runouts.
Oh, and this must be a run out here. He must be out. Richards again. Tragedy for Australia.
Australia's last wicket pair of Lilly and Thompson kept the game alive and provoked one of the most comical World Cup moments.
And it's absolute chaos out there. Nobody knows what's happened.
Now, the crowd didn't hear no ball call, you see. And Thompson and Lilly was running in between thousands and thousands of spectators. Keep going, Tomo, keep going. How many is that we've run, Dennis? That's 14 we've run, that's 14 we've run. Some years after, I was travelling in London on a London bus, and this big West Indies bus conductor came round, first please, and I looked at him, and he had this white cap, and I thought, that looks like one of mine. And I said, excuse me, sir, where did you get the white cap? He said, white cap, man, haven't you heard of Mr. Diggy Bird? He said, this is one of his white caps. I pinched his off his head in the 1975 World Cup final, and I am so proud of this white cap.
The conclusion of the first World Cup arrived at the impossible hour of 8:42 p.m. The longest day of the year in England, the perfect timing for the West Indies.
When I took over, the West Indies were really struggling financially. The further you went into the competition, the more money your country got. And by getting to the final and winning it, it gave the West Indies a lift, and they got a lot more money and got them out of that gloomy period.
And it goes to this magnificent cricketer, and how well he and his team have deserved it.
Clive Lloyd, the first man to lift the trophy. But that would be just the beginning of the story. For the West Indies, that was the start of a love affair with the World Cup, which would define many of their greatest achievements. Come 1979, they were stronger still.
The 79 World Cup was the first World Cup I was involved in, and it came right after World Series cricket, because most of that team were involved in Pac and World Series cricket. And it was a feeling of getting back to the real thing, getting back to traditional cricket, getting back to representing your country again. So it was a great feeling within the team.
1975 had been an unqualified success, and as Wisden noted, the game had never provided better entertainment in one day. This time, the 6 Test nations were joined in England by Sri Lanka and Canada, who emerged from the inaugural ICC trophy. With Australia's best players contracted to World Series cricket, it was the home nation who would provide the main threat to the West Indies.
Well, it was only the second World Cup. We had a decent side, led by Mike Brearley, Geoffrey Boycott, Ian Botham at the top of his powers, David Gower, Bob Willis, you know, some very good cricketers. So we were pretty confident in our own conditions, and we played some good cricket throughout the tournament.
And he's out. Boycott struck. The crowd go delirious.
2 wickets from the unheralded arm of Geoffrey Boycott set England on their way to victory against a weakened Australia side. There were flashes of brilliance from Ian Botham.
He'll have to move and he's gone. No chance at all. Really, it's been some tremendous fielding by the Englishman here. It was Ian Botham this time.
And a half-century from the impressive Graham Gooch. An early indication of the threat posed by a team playing in their preferred environment.
And the shot repeated this time, a little straighter, and it's beaten them up again. So 2 glorious shots there from the bat of Graham Gooch. Brings up the 100 for England and sets them well on the way to victory. And the 100 comes up at the end of 36 overs.
Four years earlier, the World Cup in England had been characterised by strong West Indian support. Ominously for the other teams involved, Clive Lloyd's side were looking even more dominant. For many, they remain the best one-day team to ever play the game. That long rhythmic run-up, so smooth and devastatingly quick. Michael Holding was quite some addition for the West Indies, not to mention Colin Croft and Joel Garner. For batsmen, there was no escape.
At that time now we were well entrenched as one of the best teams in the world, if not the best team in the world. We were beating people left, right and centre. We lost a few players, but the new players that came in, the Holdings and the Roberts and Garners and so on, just fitted in quite well.
Clive Lloyd had some magnificent individuals, both with the willow and with the ball, and he managed to mould them into a, you know, slick, lean, mean, is there any way to describe it, cricket unit.
England themselves had a nice balance, with players like Boycott, Brearley, Gower, Botham and Willis. But it was Gooch again who made the biggest impression in their fluctuating semi-final with New Zealand. 221 for 8, though, would leave them vulnerable. Mike Hendrick, who would end as the tournament's leading wicket-taker, with 3 important breakthroughs to edge England home by 9 runs. An Old Trafford capacity crowd of 22,000 had seen their team do just enough to earn a place in their first World Cup final. Now all they had to do was beat the best team on the planet. In the Caribbean, the tournament continued to weave its way into the affections of a cricket-loving public. The Stars of '79 will always be remembered. The relationship between the West Indies and the World Cup, one of mutual admiration.
Well, there you see what the West Indies boys think. It's a long way to go yet.
Gordon Greenwich had a new partner in Desmond Haynes, the two making their mark in the semi-final against Pakistan, but this was a team effort and beyond.
We had guys there who would fit in, even if they weren't a permanent member. If one of the guys dropped in, they fitted right in. And I always remember what Bob Paisley said, the Liverpool manager, who said the best 2 teams in England were Liverpool and Liverpool reserves. And I think if you have a great side, you must have great reserves.
Sarfraz to Collis King.
King was a good example. his cameo of 34 off 25 balls underlined the depth of their squad.
They were really the pioneers of what we call the modern aggressive game now. Fantastic to watch, not so much fun to play against.
In reply, Majid Khan and Zahir Abbas showed defiance and no little skill in a second wicket partnership of 166.
Picked that up beautifully.
That's a lovely stroke. It's his half-century and Richards has no chance, even on two good legs, for cutting that off.
But Colin Croft would break Pakistan's resolve.
As a count, he's out. Javed Miandad out. First ball, LBW to Croft.
3 of the middle order wickets fell to Viv Richards. More than just a batsman, here was a multi-dimensional player with strong motivation.
He had this swagger, that confidence that he could do anything, his confidence in his own ability. And also, behind him was the fact that his father, for instance, and many others like him, didn't have the opportunity because Antigua, the Windward Islands, the Leeward Islands were not in the mainstream of West Indies cricket, and therefore effectively could not qualify to play for West Indies. And he had that opportunity. He said, I'm going to make the most of it. And he did.
Oh, what a marvellous piece of fielding. A super piece of cricket, that.
And so, on to Lords once more. England with home advantage, but one man was intent on being centre stage. The body language alone demanded respect.
He said, "Good morning, man. How are you, man?" I said, "Fine, Viv." And he said, he'd wink to me, and he never said another word. Then he used to get, magnificent player.
Coming to the crease at 22 for 1, he would go on to score a brilliant 138 not out.
That's the best shot today. Right out of the textbooks, that one.
Everything about the final seemed to appeal to his sense of occasion. Collis King's contribution is often forgotten, but Richards took the lead role.
It's arrogance at its best, that one.
His languid demeanour belied a fierce determination and sense of team.
It was just a genius. And I never liked this calypso tag that they gave us, that we were flamboyant cricketers. No, I wanted to create a side that had, who can, when things were tight, that they'll be able to think through those situations.
A super shot that is. He just picked it up and hit it away over deep square leg for 6.
Well, the 79 final, I was very nervous actually because we lost some early wickets. Viv and Collis King, I think it was, who brought us back and gave us a good respectable total. But when we started losing those early wickets, I didn't watch much of it. And to be honest, I perhaps saw only the last over when I thought, okay, we have a good score, we should be able to defend the score. And I remember seeing Viv hitting the last ball for 6 over square leg off Mike Hendrick, I think it was.
And he's finished it off nicely with a 6.
Remember those days, there weren't the fielding restrictions that you have got in modern one-day cricket. And with such a big score, we just thought England could never get them.
Chasing 286, Boycott and Brearley put on 129 for the first wicket, but rather too slowly. And when the captain went for 64, caught in the deep by Collis King, it became a different game.
We got pulverised. Great side, a very, very formidable team. And of course, when you get behind the rate against those guys, how do you hit Michael Holding and Joel Garner and all these guys around the ground? The answer is you don't.
Gooch is gone, and that is real trouble for the England side.
Joel Garner was close to unplayable with 5 wickets. But this was an all-round effort. Across the board, brilliance.
He's going for a big one. Is he going to be caught? And it's a magnificent catch. We saw a great catch out there by Brearley, and this is Richards. He's really taken a superlative catch.
They were outstanding in the field, bowling, batting. They were the complete team.
And it's all over. And Hendrick quick to grab the stump. He's got his souvenir, but West Indies winning a deserved victory here by a margin of 92 runs.
The greatest team ever to play the game? They certainly make a persuasive argument. But in terms of the World Cup, that West Indies side of 1979 will always be the standard bearers, the men who reinvented the game, the subject of great reverence back home in the Caribbean and beyond. Back in 1983, India's affinity with one-day cricket was nothing like it is today. Just a single victory from 2 World Cup campaigns had failed to ignite the passion of their fervent support. There was an absence of conjecture or real confidence as the team headed to England once more.
We were just a bunch of young boys who just want to have fun. And having fun, we said that, it just turned out to be, every game becoming more serious, and winning was more fun in the evening, and that's what we are looking, how we can enjoy more.
The Indian public could be forgiven for their ambivalence, but an opening victory over the holders changed everything.
First match itself given us a slightly hope. I think throughout we would just want to be in top 4 teams after winning the first match against West Indies. And from there, the performance keep on changing.
Once again, the World Cup was held in England, but there were big changes. For the first time, non-test grounds were used, fielding restrictions were introduced, and umpires were told to clamp down on wides and bouncers.
Whilst we were playing, and without being rude, you expected the West Indies probably to win it again. They were such a charismatic side. They had the fast bowlers, had some wonderful batsmen. Expectations were sort of, if anybody, you'd have to beat the West Indies, and to beat them, you'd have to beat them almost in a one-off match in the sort of semi-finals or even the final.
England, beaten finalists 4 years earlier, began with victory over New Zealand, in a game which saw a World Cup debut for a 20-year-old Martin Crowe.
By 83 we had really felt a real sort of surge of support and focus on the one-day game, probably due to the underarm that happened in 1981 at the MCG. It really sort of galvanised the New Zealand public to support the New Zealand side, and we were playing good one-day cricket.
England in '83 also saw the first significant upset, as Zimbabwe, playing in the competition for the first time and led by Duncan Fletcher, beat Australia.
We were new on the scene. Politically, we've been allowed to play international cricket again. We'd done a lot of work to get there. We didn't know how we were going to perform, obviously from moving from the sort of level of cricket we had been playing. And to go out there and in our very first game beat Australia, it was a good achievement, and it made us very proud of what we were there for. And I believe it put Zimbabwe on the map, and everything took off from that one.
So Winston Davis, the newcomer to the West Indies attack.
It would turn out to be a miserable tournament for Australia, who were given a lesson by Winston Davis.
And that's out, caught by Clive Lloyd. A victim for Winston Davis.
And that's it. Davis, another wicket. 7 wickets for Winston Davis.
his 7 for 51, a cup record. But the West Indies weren't the only team playing aggressive cricket.
I didn't have to say to anybody what to do, what not to do, because I was aggressive a cricketer myself. And perhaps that aggression suited for one-day cricket. And in '83, I don't think so we require to tell anybody.
Kapil Dev was lighting up the tournament with his fearless approach to the game. If India's cricket had been safety first in previous World Cups, here they had a leader who was on the front foot at all times. Back home, they were slowly waking up to the realisation that in Kapil Dev they had a player with the ability to galvanise not just 11 men, but possibly an entire nation. If they needed convincing, then soon would arrive the tournament's defining moment. With India 9 for 4 against Zimbabwe, there followed 175 of the most glorious runs from the captain.
That inning gave the team a reassurance, yes, we have the ability and we can win against any circumstances, or we can bounce back from any place, any situation.
And his influence was felt once again in the semi-final, as an uninspired England were comfortably beaten.
Well, Kapil Dev, as you'd expect, was a very confident, sort of bouncy, loved his cricket, you know, and he bowled and he batted, and he was sort of Prince of Indian cricket at that time, a man who could change a game with both bat and ball.
What a great day for Indian cricket.
At the Oval, a sense of déjà vu. A repeat of the semi-final from 4 years earlier between the West Indies and Pakistan. The surroundings provided a sense of foreboding for Pakistan, who would miss Javed Miandad unavailable due to illness. But after posting 184 for 8 from their 60 overs, the writing was on the wall.
Must be very close, yes. He's been given by umpire Whitehead. Greenwich is out.
Despite a couple of early breakthroughs, normal service was quickly resumed.
Full toss, and that's gone many a mile. First bounce for 4. Oh, crashing shot by Richards.
Beautiful stroke. Been waiting for that one, dropped a little bit short.
West Indies 1 run to win. Zahir Abbas to Richards. There it is.
An unbeaten 80 from Viv Richards, and the West Indies through to their 3rd consecutive final to face the only side to beat them.
Having lost to India early on, they should have taken heed of that result coming into the final.
A sense of anticlimax hung in the air. The World Cup would surely stay in West Indian hands. They didn't need any encouragement, but they certainly got it from the pitch.
Well, that's safe enough.
There was so much grass on that wicket, I still remember clearly in my mind. And my thought went, you know, what the hell is happening? I mean, this is not a one-day pitch, a one-day wicket. This is something unfair. And we were disgusted, honestly. In the team meeting also, we talk about that. I said, yes, I think they will cut the grass. It's not going to be such a bouncy and green wicket for the final. But somehow, perhaps, God is on our side than anything else.
The Indian batsmen did what they could.
Got him away again, and that's a beautiful stroke. Picked it up, and round about leg stump.
Chris Srikanth top scoring with 38. but when he was trapped by Malcolm Marshall, hopes seemed to fade. It took some useful lower-order runs to reach a total of 183.
In the air, middle of the bat, screams away in front of the pavilion, 4 runs.
But against a formidable batting lineup, such a total wasn't even close. Michael Holding wrapping up the innings in style. The West Indies were jubilant, and it seemed with good reason.
Once we bowled India out that cheaply, I think everyone just figured, oh, it's over. We'll get these runs. Irrespective of what happens, somebody will get these runs. As I said, complacency set in. I think no one took it up on themselves to be responsible enough to say, I am going to get these runs.
And I think Michael Holding is right, what he said. I think they thought it was so easy. They just thought it was a matter of going in. And before they knew where they were struggling.
But at 50 for 1, and with Richards at the crease, the West Indies were looking good.
Not so good. Beautifully caught. He's hit that away to within 15 yards of the boundary.
Whenever I meet him, sometime, even Richard, he says, why the hell I have hit that shot, You still remember that,
I know what happened, but I don't remember, anything in my mind went through during that period. It's just he hit the ball and I went for it.
What followed was arguably the greatest upset in World Cup history. With Madan Lal and Mahinda Amarnath using the conditions, the most uncharacteristic collapse saw the West Indies well beaten.
And that's out. Yes, it's all over this time. Lost his nerve in the end, did Michael Holding. Tried to swing that straight ball to leg. It's another wicket for Amarnath. Now delighted he looks.
Only thing I remember, Jeff Howarth coming to me. He said, Kapil, retired. This is the best time you can do that. Now we felt 83 World Cup cricket changed the entire sport in our country, and that 83 given a different dimension to Indian cricket.
There is nowhere on the planet that stimulates the senses quite like the subcontinent. So the first World Cup to be held outside England would be an examination of body and mind for all those involved.
Not a lot of us had spent a lot of time on the subcontinent before, and most of us just the one tour, so to get used to the conditions and just that fanaticism that we knew was coming from the Indian public and the supporters was something that we were going to have to control. I can remember it was probably the start of a saying of Australian cricket on the subcontinent, which is to lose patience is to lose the battle, and we believed in that every day.
India, a country of more than 1 billion inhabitants. Yet nothing unites them quite like the game of cricket. Excitement at co-hosting the 1987 tournament as defending champions, tempered somewhat by an opening game defeat, albeit by a single run to the unfancied Australians. For them, it was a victory with real meaning.
Well, if you'd seen us that night, it was like we'd won the World Cup and we were carrying on like good sorts, and then all of a sudden people realised late in the evening, hang on, we've still got quite a few games to go here. But look, it was enormous. You can't talk enough about how that gave everyone a lift.
The coach Bob Simpson would prove an influential figure, but Alan Border had been a reluctant captain. Taking over at a time of transition and turbulence without experienced names to call upon.
I sort of thought to myself, well, you know, why would you really want to do this job? But going into that 87 World Cup, you could see light at the end of the tunnel with some of the characters that we had in the side and the talent.
The cricket throughout would be closely fought, coping with conditions a big factor.
Yeah, I remember going down to, I think it was Jaipur to play the West Indies, and I've never seen so much grass on the pitch. You know, we thought, blimey, you know, what's going to happen here?
Neil Foster and Alan Lamb stand out performers for England as the West Indies failed to reach the semi-finals for the first time.
They were the team, if you could beat them, you know, you had a chance of winning the World Cup.
It's in the gap, it's there, well played, Foster. And down go the heads of the West Indians. They played it so well, but were taken by the brilliance of Lamb. And see how Richards is the first to shake Lamb's hand.
Pakistan had been beaten semi-finalists in the two previous World Cups. But this time it felt different. They would play the Australians in Lahore with almost complete home support and a growing sense of faith.
Here the whole country gears up for the World Cup. And nothing else happens but cricket.
Going to Lahore is a tough assignment, and they were the favourites, I would have to say. Maybe the West Indies going to the tournament, but certainly as the tournament unfolded, Pakistan, one of the favourites, playing Pakistan in Pakistan, particularly Lahore, there's a bit of a cauldron there. So if you can keep that crowd quiet, you're a long way to sort of doing the job.
I can remember the game quite vividly where we got off to a reasonably good start, made a half-decent total, but where we were really working on in the tournament was shutting down the opposition. And, you know, they had fantastic cricketers like, you know, Imran Khan and Javed Miandad and some very experienced players in there that were going to test us.
David Boone's half-century helped Australia to reach 267 for 6. The wicket of Imran Khan for 58 would prove a turning point, with Pakistan looking well set. Craig McDermott with a 5-wicket haul, greeted by eerie silence. The club cricketers, as Zahir Abbas had called them, providing the perfect retort.
You know, we just bowled and fielded like terriers, and you know the result goes your way, and all of a sudden you realise we are in a World Cup final. I mean, how good is this? It's just against everything that was written or our chances going to the tournament, and all of a sudden we're there. We're in the World Cup final. So it was just a huge feeling.
On the streets of Pakistan, disappointment and derision. Australia's result was celebrated back home, but on the subcontinent, this was the outcome that nobody wanted.
People in Pakistan were disappointed. They weren't upset. They were disappointed, and that disappointment you could tell by looking at the faces. Wherever you went, they all just looked at you like this. You know, what happened? Why we lost?
Indian hopes rested on beating England in Bombay, but the English side had adapted well to conditions and had an astute, knowing captain in Mike Gatting.
I think once India and Pakistan got through to the semi-finals, everybody in Asia was obviously hoping it was going to be an India-Pakistan final. But it didn't turn out that way.
Tremendous atmosphere here.
India had built their success on 2 left-arm spinners, Ravi Shastri and Maninder Singh bowling left-arm spin to a particular type of formula.
They were 2 left-armers who bowled really well, and we had talked about the night before about they need to go for 5 and over.
So we devised this plan that, you know, if when they came on, we weren't going to try and hit them sort of traditional areas, extra cover, mid-off, long off. We'd just go for the sweep.
So Gucci for 2 days just kept sweeping all these left-arm spinners, and the little left-arm spinners kept coming up in the net saying, Mr. Gooch, have we bowled that badly? You kept sweeping every ball. He said, you're just watching the match. So Goochie kept sweeping. He'd fine sweeping, then he'd move it in front of... It was just magnificent, you know, that he put into practice what he was going to do.
And it works to a T.
Gooch went on to make one of the shrewdest hundreds in the World Cup archives.
That's a marvellous shot by Gooch, swept purely on length, and a brilliant stop.
Scoring close to 500 runs in the tournament, this was his finest hour.
And Gooch continuing the sweet shot, and 4 more runs to Graham Gooch.
An important 50 from Gatting helped take England to 254 from their 50 overs.
Still a fairly modest total. The game was very, very, 6, 7 and over I think they needed. Kapil Dev came in, and Kapil Dev on a flat wicket, and he smashed Eddie Hemmings over sort of a deepish square leg.
He's gone for a big hit. Dropping short to 6. Kapil Dev dropping on his knees.
And Eddie said, put one out, give him one. And I said, well look, we can't really do that because he'll just milk us for one. And they only need sort of one a ball. Kapil knew what we were talking about. He said, right, I'm going to do it again. So he went to do it again. But fair plays to Eddie. He just tossed it up a little bit higher, I think. And he's launched into it again, and it's gone up absolutely miles. And I'm a square leg. And I'm sort of looking at this, it's gone up miles, blue sky,
And that's a big hit. Gatting's under it, and he's caught it.
Unfortunately managed to catch it, and then there was silence. And I think that was probably the turning point in the match.
After all the talk of an India-Pakistan final, it turned out to be the old enemies, England and Australia.
When we first walked out into Eden Garden in the morning, and there's about over 100,000 people, it was an awesome experience. And then to work out after 5 or 10 minutes that we were playing against England, and there was a lot of memory in India, and that the Indians were actually barracking for Australia, sort of changed our sense for the day as well.
Once again, it was Boone who held the innings together, making 75.
Beautifully placed.
Mike Valletta showing good intent as Australia reached a par score of 253. But the final would come down to the two captains.
Well, you talk about key moments. Throughout the tournament, every side will tell you there's a drop catch here or a run out there or whatever. And to win a tournament, you need to win those key moments. And Gat was in there, and he was smoking it. He was batting very, very well and taking the game away from us, scoring runs quickly. So instead of Tim May bowling the next over, was going to be me. I was basically cajoled into it, and Tim was getting hit around the park a bit, so it was something had to happen. Catches the top edge, hits him on the shoulder and goes straight up in the air. Bloody beauty, one for none.
Mike Gatting trying to play the reverse sweep shot. But that's the first time he's made a mistake on this tour when he's played it. So what a breakthrough for Alan Border.
He's copped heaps over it for years now, hasn't he? And I never let him forget every time I see him. I just have to go like that.
Had it not hit my shoulder, it could have gone for 3. We could have won the World Cup, and then where would have been AB? So we always have a giggle about that.
What a cheer!
Gatting's wicket would prove the difference. England falling 7 runs short. For Australia, it was a victory which would be the start of their march to world domination.
That is Australia's joy.
I've been captain for 3 years, but probably from that point, I started to take on the job, far more seriously. There was a sense that we'd got a group together that was going to be around for a while and going to play some good cricket. So all those sort of things, apart from just enjoying the moment, which, you know, you just get caught up in it, don't you, with the, you know, the scenes in the dressing room and subsequent celebrations. But there, when you start thinking about what that really means, you know, you just think, well, you know, Australian cricket's, we've turned the corner.
Next time, the 90s and beyond. Cornered Tigers. Moments that altered history. Fierce rivalries and record breakers.